Hey guys, welcome to Finally Clicked, the podcast where we discuss business, leadership, and personal development. My name is Margaret Smith, and I'm the Director of Operations for Pickett Street Properties, a real estate team out of Bothell, Washington. And I'll be here every week with our owner and team leader, Jesse D. Moore. We'll be digging into concepts and ideas that have helped us both personally and professionally. And you'll also get a chance to hear from local and national experts that we know provide massive value to get to the point where it all finally clicks.
Hello, everybody. This is Jesse Moore and Margaret Smith with Finally Clicked, an exploration of the relationship between an executive and their admin, the admin world and the executive world.
I like that, an exploration.
Yes, it's an exploration. I feel like we are like the Mars rover going into territories
Wow.
that may be sometimes brutal, unexplored, dangerous, life-threatening.
Perfect.
And what's more life-threatening and anxiety-ridden than the idea of communicating
Oh, nothing I know. It's
between
terrifying.
two parties, like an executive and an administrator.
Totally terrifying.
Yeah, so today we are going to give you our top 10 communication tips between the rainmaker and the admin. Margaret has come up with 5 of her own, very thoughtfully considered. To be fair, she came up with like 8, and I took 3 of them.
Thank you. You would have come up with them yourself. You totally would have.
Well,
We agreed upon them.
I came up with my own ideas, but they were just more synthesized.
Yes.
And so
There you go.
when you had a surplus, it only seemed natural to balance
I
it
like
out.
to share. I'm a good sharer.
So I took the ones that maybe made more sense for me.
Yeah.
Right.
That resonate with you a lot.
All right. All right. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
We're going to do this. Margaret's going to cover 5. I'm going to cover 5. We're going to go in order of least important to most important. And Margaret, why don't you start us off?
All right. So why is communication important even? I mean, communication is key. And that's what I think comes up in conversations for me with admin across the nation. If someone calls me up and is like, Margaret, can you talk to me for 15 minutes? Inevitably, communication with their rainmaker comes up. So that's one of the reasons why we're talking about this today. So for me, my 5th tip that I wrote down is communicate in bundles. And by that, I mean communicate your ideas in a way where you're not just dispersed throughout the day, but you're thinking about when you communicate them and how you do it. So
you mean you don't want to just barge into my office at any given time, any given moment with some random thought or some random question
Exactly.
that interrupts my entire train of thought and everything that I'm doing and makes me angry and upset and frustrated with you to the point that I don't want to talk to you anymore?
That pretty much explains it very clearly.
Right.
Yes, and I think that happens on both ends. And oftentimes, I think we also have to explain that at the beginning of any partnership, there's a training period. And this is different from that. This is when you get into the partnership, and as you're building the partnership and understanding the business as an operations person, thinking about how I choose to spend my time with you. And so in the beginning, it was very clear, I could come in and ask you questions at any time. But now I really choose what to talk to you about, what's important, what's priority. And then the other things I list on my 411, my weekly conversation with you, to talk about every Monday or Friday, whenever it happens. And so communicating in bundles, I think it shows respect for someone's time. I think it shows that you know how to prioritize. I think it's just a really essential communication tool for a business to be effective and efficient.
Yeah, and I think, if I know you're honoring my time, I'm more apt to be patient and listen and give you more comprehensive answers.
Yes, because it's not going to just be some random crap that I'm coming to you with. It's something that I've prioritized that and you know how I prioritize important things.
Yeah, I mean, there's just nothing worse for me than being interrupted or being distracted.
Or someone wasting your time.
Or someone taking my
focus. I know that's a
focus
pet peeve of yours.
away from something.
And it is for me as well. Yeah.
All right. So
that's my 5.
Communicate
Number 5.
in bundles. That's a very appropriate, I would say. And one of the things I want to talk about as we go through each of these tips is maybe who needs to pay the most attention to that and who is the beneficiary of that.
Okay.
So I think communicating in bundles is largely an administrative hack in dealing with their executive versus the inverse?
I don't know. I might have to challenge you here, because I think it goes both ways for this one, at least, because oftentimes there are admin that have leaders that shout things at them or email things every 30 minutes. And then they don't understand why things don't get done. Hey, I gave you this, 9:30, 10, 10:30, 11, 11:30, 12, all the way through the day. And then it's like you've interrupted the cycle. We have to focus. We're a different type of person, right? We have to focus to be able to get something done, especially if it's something new. And so I think this one goes both ways.
Well, if that's true, then you're very forgiving with me, because I have to tell you when I think of it.
That's true.
Otherwise, I forget about it.
I am a very forgiving person. And at this point in my job, it's very different than it was in the beginning. I do a lot of the things that I have to do on a daily basis almost on autopilot now. So it's like with this podcast, what I realized last week is I had never, that was something I hadn't done in a little while, where Wednesday or Tuesday, whenever I had to compile the podcast, learn how to upload it to SoundCloud, that was a new activity for me. So I was here until about 6:00 that night by choice, because I wanted to get it done that day. And so having someone interrupt me during times like that would have been really hard and frustrating, but I don't experience that same frustration anymore as much, because I know you so well.
To be fair, I've learned not to just like yell from one room to the other.
Yeah.
And that generally I'll wait for us, if we're having lunch together, I'll bring it up a bunch of things then.
I know that your worry is you don't want to lose that thought. And I don't want you to lose it either. So if you have to say it to me and then I write it down and we talk about it later, that's like coming to, what's the word? Coming together, working together. It's coming to
consensus.
Thank you. Consensus. And having some flexibility in what's best for me.
All right. So communicate in bundles. I would have to say that this is a very important one. As an executive, I would say, I do not like being interrupted. And if you're listening to this and you have a tendency to just kind of pop in and out of your executive's office, maybe try this hack. Try logging a few questions together and dealing with them at one time. Mm-hmm. All right, number 5 for me. And this is actually not my idea. I did not push this. This is something Margaret did on her own, and then we've come to realize what a benefit it is. And that is bring them into the room. So what we mean by that is if you're an executive or a rainmaker and you're doing something that would give your admin insight into how your brain works or how your thought process works, or in any way that they can have a greater understanding of your business, of your thinking process, just let them into the room so they can listen to a meeting, listen to the conversation, see how you would handle it. Can you give everyone an idea?
Oh, absolutely. I can give countless examples. And I love this topic and I love this tip, because I think sometimes executives may forget, or people with different personality types may forget why you hired us. And one of those reasons is that we are observant and we execute. And so I can't read your mind. You just hired me. Let's go back in time. You just hired me. I don't know you from Joe on the street. How am I supposed to get to know you and be able to anticipate your needs if I don't get to spend time with you? So bring me, that's when, I shoved myself into every room with you before you even asked me. And then you started asking me and you call me your notebook. And yes, it's a notebook for many things, not just for the tasks that I'm going to be doing around that project. But man, if you give me a chance, I will show you the ROI of Margaret being in a room.
Yeah, I think this one is important to us because of how our dynamic works, which is I literally will not take a notebook into a meeting because that's not how my brain works. I don't need to write things down for it to make sense or to remember it. I have my own techniques, and quite honestly, having you there taking notes in your way is more beneficial than me taking notes in my way. So what we figured out is if I'm going to be more broad spectrum about our relationship, or in regards to this specifically, I would say that I am the vision and you're the implementer quite often, where I have the idea, but I need you to implement it and flush it out. And so for those reasons, it's important for you to be in the room to really, and honestly, it's another hack for me because I don't want to sit there and regurgitate everything that happened.
No, saving time.
And it's going to frustrate me. And so I'd rather just have you there listening, hearing me, because by watching me in that meeting what's important to me. And you can focus on that.
Absolutely. And this reminds me of Simon Sinek and Monique Hellstrom's podcast that they did with Bonnie Lo Kramen, I believe it was, where he compared this very thing to the military. And oftentimes execs in the military are in the room with the leadership. And so it's not only is it for me to learn what to implement, but it's also because I want to be with those leaders. I want to be one of those leaders. And the likelihood is higher that I will become one of those by being in the room. So I also consider it, like, from the very beginning, I was like, this is not something I take lightly. I take it seriously. It's an honor to be in everybody's presence. And no matter what their level of leadership is, this is a learning opportunity. And so I can't tell you, it's like every week I talk to at least 2 to 3 admin at minimum who have leaders that don't spend 5 minutes with them a week because they're so busy. And I get it, but stop for a minute, stop for a half an hour. And don't just talk about tasks for their work, but talk about what you want for them as a partner with you, because you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to keep busy. What's that gonna do?
When there's times when we're busy.
Oh, all the time.
And we have to be very purposeful about how we interact and when we can talk. And so that might be a car ride from one appointment to the next. It might be a quick lunch appointment. It might be a glass of wine with 15 minutes to spare. You know, it could be all sorts of things, but we have to make it happen. And
this reminds me, and this is like one of those, you can call it as an inappropriate thing Margaret said, but I've actually heard someone say, I pay you to read my mind. I'm sorry. No! I do not read. I believe I am telepathic a little bit, or I'm a little bit intuitive, maybe. Let's go there. But I can't read your mind. And, and I think we have to acknowledge that. You're not paying me to read your mind.
Oh my, I'm sorry. Do I know this person who said this?
Maybe.
Oh my gosh. I would have a strong rebuke for that person. That is no way to communicate.
No.
Read my mind is no way to communicate.
I wish people could read my mind, and I used to wish that a lot, and it's not appropriate. It's not intelligent. It's not
No one
passable.
wants to read my mind.
So, yeah.
Well, the other thing I have written down in regards to this is, if you do if you're an executive or a rainmaker and you do redundant tasks, that's another time to have your admin there.
Yeah, talk about efficiencies we can help you with.
They can find ways to make you more efficient, more proficient. And you just might be used to doing it your way. And having an outside administrative perspective on a task might change a huge dynamic for your company.
That was a really good one.
Your turn.
All right. Number 4 for me is say it until it's clear. And by that, I mean, you might have to have the same conversation about the same topic more than once.
Until it finally clicks.
Wow, that was perfect. I think people give up easily. And I think it happens in regular everyday life. We just give up after the first time. And I think Susan Scott refers to this in Fierce Conversations too. But a relationship or a partnership is not just one conversation. It's an ever-evolving conversation. So we've probably had conversations about certain topics 5, 10, 15 times sometimes, but we're able to have them fewer now, or we can have one conversation about a certain topic and reach an agreement way faster than I think we ever could before, because we went through the trials and struggles of having those really hard conversations. So I guess I don't know if say it till it's clear is the perfect. It's like fight through it, or go for clarity. If we're both on the same page, man, can we make massive things happen?
Yeah, go for clarity.
Go for clarity.
Go for clarity.
I like that. Changing it.
Sounds like a Nickelodeon show.
Oh gosh.
With an exclamation point on the end. Yeah, I think, getting to a place of understanding is absolutely important. And I think some admin might give up too soon out of fear of being seen as less intelligent or stupid or not getting it, right?
Yeah.
But I think it is super important to fight through that and get to the end. And we joke all the time, and it'll never end, about how differently you and I communicate, that we almost speak in different languages. And thankfully, I'm proficient enough in Margaret E's and you're proficient enough in Jesse's that we can understand each other now. But it certainly took time.
Yeah, and I like to think, I think if you're an A+ operations guru, I like to say you're kind of like, they used to call Shirley Temple the one-take Shirley, because no matter, even though she was performing at like an age of 3, you told her once what to do and she would do it. And that is always my goal, that if you tell me something once, you won't ever have to tell me again. And I try to make that's like a goal of mine, for sure, that you don't have to repeat yourself. But if you take the time to tell me, I will apply it.
All right, number 4 for me is ask for most effective ways to communicate. I wrote, one size does not fit all. Some things will be best via email. Some things are better via text. Others better in person. Having shared expectations will increase proficiency and productivity for both of you. So I'm trying to think of a few examples.
Remember what you would do when you were at conferences in the beginning?
Remind me.
You would give me a heads up and say, hey, I'm just going to shoot you an email with like all of my thoughts or random things that I think of during the day. And just know that we'll talk about them when I get back, or like they might be things that you wanted me to implement while you were sitting in class that you thought of while you were there. And so you would typically email those to me.
When's the last time you left me a voicemail?
Oh God, like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I hate voicemails.
I hate voicemail.
I think we both hate voicemails. It's like,
I never
if
want
I see a voicemail from you, I would be worried. I would be like, who died? It'd have to be a death or a hospital visit, or even then I think you might wait. Like,
why is Jesse calling from a flip phone that doesn't have the ability to text, Snapchat? Yeah, so I'm not big on talking on the phone, which is funny as a salesperson.
Neither am I either.
I don't like to be stuck on the phone, and that's more because of my ability to prioritize time. In fact, I mention this in class often, class that I teach. We don't actually answer the phone at Pickett Street Properties. Not incoming phone calls. And the reason for that is because we figured out quickly that 90% of all phone calls were from appraisers and real estate agents that couldn't read. And what I mean by that is all the information is on the MLS. Everybody has all the information they need. They just feel the need to call us and waste our time and try to figure out something.
That is a lack of professionalism that seriously irritates me.
So instead, we actually have it so on our message it says, for faster results, please text message the same number. And so our whole team gets the text messages as they come in. Our voicemails are transcribed to text messages and sent to everybody. And so for me, text messaging is a primary form of communication. It's probably the easiest way to get me to do something. But maybe not the best way to get me to remember something. So I like text messages for something that I need to know right now, but I don't have to necessarily remember.
Yeah, I like to communicate with you via text if it's something directional, like, hey, I'm headed to this restaurant. I'll meet you there. I'll be there in 5 minutes. But I also really try not to bog down your text with work-related questions unless it's a necessity. And I'm in the office and you're out traveling or something and I need to know something in order to execute. Otherwise, I really do try to save that for in person, because I don't want to bog down your email or your text unless it's just like a, hey, how are you doing type thing.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. Email. I hate email. I don't like getting email. I don't like looking at my email. It stresses me out. And so, but there are times I do want you to email me. And generally, that's something that might be 3 to 7 days out priority-wise. Like, hey, this is important. I need your
input
or feedback on this, but I don't need it right this second. And that way I can keep it unread in my email and then answer you all at once when I at a later time.
Yeah.
And so, and for our clients, this is a sales technique as well. Setting expectations, asking people how they prefer to be communicated with. There are certain clients that want me to pick up the phone and call them. Most people want me to text them. Some people want me to email them. It's all over the board. But by asking the question how they want to be communicated with, I'm fostering a relationship of communication by asking that question.
Yeah.
So
it's a good one. I think I prefer email for work just because I use email like a checklist. But oftentimes I'll take your email and I'll take the duty out of it and put it on a Post-it note, which some executives think if someone uses Post-it notes, they shouldn't be hired. I don't agree with that either. I think it depends on how efficient you are as a person with all those different things.
You can write on your forehead for all I care, as long as it gets done.
As long as it gets done, right? And so my email, I like the email inbox zero concept, which essentially I never have more than 10 to 15 emails in my inbox. I feel so good about it. I can wake up the next day, feel like a human.
I'm just imagining you in a meeting with writing on your forehead right now.
It can happen. All right. Should I go to my number 3? My number 3 is the Fierce Conversations dialogue. So for those of you that haven't read Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott, you can actually Google the dialogues. And I like this as a tip because it helps guide hard conversations. And it's super easy to fill out. It gives you, if you're not comfortable or yet used to having a conversation that's outside your comfort zone, this will give you some guidance. So I'm always going to have it in my tool set, and I bring it out when needed.
Yeah, I know for a fact we'll do a Fierce specific podcast in the future. So we'll save a lot of the content for that.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we can even
say,
get Susan here.
One thing I've always one thing I've realized in my age and wisdom is that I don't have to figure everything out. Somebody before me has figured it out.
Most likely.
And if I read a book every once in a while, maybe that'll be a hack for me. And so Fierce Conversations is a communication hack.
Totally.
For sure. Yeah. And it gives you models to use, to reference, to follow. Like literally you can just read their models word for word and effectively communicate. Very stress-filled, anxiety-ridden conversations.
Yeah, it's amazing.
All right. My number 3, use personality and behavioral assessments to your advantage. So, this is kind of, I feel like I don't want to lose people on this one because I think these assessments are what you make of them. They're not, Myers-Briggs.
It's not the end-all, be-all,
say it's great. Other people say it's a bunch of hooey. I think you can say that about anything. Anything that we use and depend on is just a human construct that we've used to define some sort of element of life. And so all these behavioral assessments are basically looking for trends in behavior or personality and annotating, maybe for lack of a better word, overall behavior into a few principles or a few very specific behaviors. So, for example, we do several personality assessments. We've done Myers-Briggs. We've done the AVA. We have done
the KPA.
We have done Strength Finders. We have done the DISC. We have done, what's the Enneagram?
The Enneagram.
So there's a number of these. About the only thing we haven't done is like some sort of zodiac or horoscope one. But what is nice about these is it is a way, if you're having difficulty communicating with somebody and you have access to their assessment, it can give you insight into why they're acting a certain way or why they even communicate a certain way. That might be frustrating to you, but at least you understand that it's not unique to them. They're not trying to do this to you. They're not trying to frustrate you.
No.
They just have different rules of operation than you.
Yeah, I think for me what I loved about it that I had never experienced before was it added words to my vocabulary. Maybe not words that I didn't already know the definition of, but it added a way for me to speak what was in my head, but I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to say it in a way that made sense to you. And so to have someone else say it and be able to use it as an example for myself and say, oh yeah, I really identify with that. That's how I think. That's why I react that way to something. It helps add perspective and gives a voice sometimes when maybe you're just at the end of your rope and you've tried communicating 10 times and it hasn't worked. So you do something like this to try and hack it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was through those assessments that we realized that for someone who's a high S, which is typically a admin candidate, that the why matters a lot to them. Why, you can't just tell an admin, hey, do this for me. You need to help them understand why they're doing it, why it's important to you, and in knowing why, they can then prioritize that same task in the future against other tasks. And so once I understood that, it helped me to explain why.
Ultimately, yeah.
In the beginning of any request, that it would help you, and then in the end it would help me. Then I adapted pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we all want to help ourselves, right? So when you figure out that by doing something, you're ultimately helping yourself, it makes a whole lot of sense. And I don't think people understand the importance of it because they just hear why, and they don't understand. So it's the admin's job too, the operations person, to say, this is why I want to understand you. Once I understand you, I'm going to work 10 times harder for you. Who doesn't want to hear that? Like if I know, and that's the only reason actually why I'm in real estate and on this team specifically, is because you had a mission and a vision that was maybe not written down yet when I started here, but you had it and you spoke it. I am a very passion driven, do right for the world type person. And so the why for me is much bigger than just saying, oh, you're doing this task because of this. I can see in my head the waterfall and what happens by doing that. And I'll work super hard for our clients because I passionately believe in helping people find homes that they can afford and helping them understand what used to be such a gray area for me.
Well, and I've gotten spoiled, now I'm used to communicating and working with you, because when there's opportunity for other people to help me, I get frustrated because they aren't listening. Like we've discussed this recently. That in recent history, I felt like someone didn't listen to me, even though I said exactly what to do. And then they asked me 5 questions, which got us right back to where I left off, which is, this is what I want you to do.
Yep.
So we have the benefit, thankfully, of having done this for 6 years together. So.
Yeah. Vlogged our time, for sure.
All right.
My number 2 is slow down to speed up. And so for this one, it's meant mostly for the executive to understand, again, kind of going back to the why, but we know that your minds work a mile a minute. And when you're creating a vision or you're thinking up ideas, you're moving really quickly. And then one of the most frustrating things in the world is to stop and tell other people what you're thinking to make it happen. And so all I mean by this is slow down so that in the future you can speed up. You may not see it right now or feel it right now. It may be super painful, but if you slow down now, explain it just once, then you'll be able to actually move much faster towards your vision because you'll have someone who understands it and can actually implement it.
So do you think that this is more applicable at the beginning of
Absolutely.
a working relationship?
100%.
Okay.
I don't think you need to slow down now. I think sometimes you need to go faster. I'm caught up to you, and it's so great. Yeah, I usually say it took about 2 years to get to know the business and get to know my role and really earn it. But it probably took me closer to 3 years to really get up to speed with you. And because I was working in positions before and in industries before where the opportunity was not as available. There was no need to think quickly because we couldn't implement quickly. In the nonprofit industry, you're absolutely strapped in by money and by, all sorts of red tape. It's not true here. I'd never worked in something like that before where you can envision an idea and you can actually make it happen. So in the beginning, you absolutely had to slow down. And I also had to run really fast. I had to get over some of my analysis paralysis.
Well, even today makes me think of this in the sense that we've had a productive day. We got some sellers to reduce their prices.
That was huge.
And quite honestly, it was unexpected. I didn't expect them to decide to do so quickly. But we have a time frame where we get the most benefit from reducing a price at a certain time of the day, a certain time of the week, and then making sure that all the pieces are in place for that waterfall process to happen. Because we have to get the seller to agree to a price reduction. Then we have to generate the form that makes that price reduction legal. We have to get them to sign it. These clients were headed out of town. They're getting on a plane. They're like, I'll sign it when we land. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I need you to sign it now. Because if they don't sign it, then we can't get the flyer printed by the printer because they like to close early.
And we
before
can't
the
get
weekend.
it on the MLS.
And I have to get it to the designer before I get it to the printer to make the price adjustment, right? So
Yeah.
there's just a whole waterfall process. And when you know the waterfall process in your head, it's hard to slow down and explain it because you're like, good Lord, get
Just
to the end
go.
already.
Yeah.
But you're right. If you explain it once and you do it well, and the person you're talking to or the administrator has an opportunity to create a process one time for that system, you're fine. Now you can move forward.
Yeah. And then the hope is that the executive hired an A-plus player so that they never, ever again in the history of their career have to explain that waterfall process again.
Yeah, and that's kind of the goal.
That's the goal.
Is never have to.
Yep.
In fact, that is the standard on our team. Like, I don't mind people asking me a question once, but they'll be damned if they ask me twice the same question.
And it's the same for me too. I'm a little bit probably more lenient with that because when you have new people, it just inevitably it happens. But it also helps me recognize talent.
Yeah.
And typically talent doesn't need to ask you twice.
True. All right. My number 2 is be aware of body language. Be aware of nonverbal communication. So this comes easily to me as a force of habit. I will not, I don't know how deep to go into this, but I guess how I grew up, my father was a stoic cowboy and didn't always freely speak his mind. And so we often had to interpret how he was feeling based on his body language. And so I credit my father for making me a master of body language because I had to learn how to interpret his mood and how he felt based on literally his nonverbal communication. And it's been a blessing and a curse for me as I get older and get into sales. It's a huge blessing for me. For my friendships, it's a curse. I am so tuned in to body language that someone might say something that I know is not true or authentic, and I can't let it go. And I'll push them on it until they relent. And then they're like, damn it, Jesse, I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to tell you. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I can't finish this conversation until you tell me the truth or until we deal with this or until I know what this is because I trust my intuition and I trust my ability to translate nonverbal communication. And what you're telling me doesn't match the words coming out of your mouth. So be aware of body language. I think this is probably easiest for, well, I don't want to generalize too much, but I think extroverts are a little more demonstrative.
Absolutely.
Right?
Totally.
They'll sigh and they'll roll their eyes and they'll throw up their hands in frustration.
Yeah.
You haven't seen me do any of those things, have you?
None.
Yeah, so I think extroverts are very loud when it comes to body language style. Now, that being said, introverts aren't quiet when it comes to body language. If anything, it's a different spectrum because you may see them withdraw or you may see them close off or you may see them will their body into another room. You know what I mean? Like, but being aware and attuned to someone's body language can save you a lot of words.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think it's part of an emotional intelligence piece too, I guess. I feel like one of the things I had to work on as an introvert was being more demonstrative in my body language when I speak in front of classes and in front of groups of people. So when I was getting my degree in social work, they videotaped us giving interviews. And I was fairly good at the time. It was like 2006. And we were acting. And actually, I can play another person fairly well. Like if it's not me, I can play into another person and I can do that piece. But I didn't move my hands as well as I do now. I didn't demonstrate confidence. And so it's not natural. And I think when you are an introvert and you're on the shy side too, which shyness is different from being an introvert, but it's painful to have a lot of people watch you. It's painful to have all the eyes on you. And I think it's also super important to push past that because sometimes introverts can be some of the best processors and thinkers and speakers. They just haven't ever been encouraged to talk. And so And then the other piece about body language, I would just say, so it's a work in progress for me always, and I'm constantly talking to admin about that too, because when we're in a conversation with an executive, we need to physically display confidence, or they're not going to believe us. And so I was talking to Jesse about this earlier, and it's about when you're in a heated discussion, they teach you to pay attention to this in social work too. Like, are you sitting? Are you standing? Oftentimes, if you're standing over someone, that's a place of dominance, and you're not going to get a client or someone that you're wanting to work with in a good place emotionally if you're standing over them. So I always think about that stuff too, though. I'm just a very observant person. So if I'm in a meeting with 5 people, I'm watching everybody's body language too, which I think is another thing why we actually work together really well, because we can read our body language. And I've worked on that, on like being more demonstrative, because I've realized how important that is to exude confidence.
Well, you're also 6 feet tall.
I am. Yes, I forgot that part.
You might be more mindful of sitting down.
How the space I'm taking up, yes.
Right. I mean, when you...
I've always been very aware of that. That's true.
When you unfurl your arms, like, you might touch both walls. So you have to kind of be aware of your physical aspect.
I could hurt myself.
But, I mean, so let me ask you this. Do you think that someone who's 5 foot tall needs to be mindful of this as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, we've worked with people in the past who are really petite women specifically, but shorter men as well. Like, you absolutely, whatever you're thinking and feeling shows in your body language. And so if you are anxious or nervous and you're trying to impress a seller or a buyer or help them understand that you are confident in your abilities as a real estate agent, they're going to feel that if you're anxious or nervous, because it just exudes. It comes out of your body. Like, it shows. So, well,
that makes me think of another way that this is expressed, or what we're talking about. You remember, we had someone who worked for us. I mean, I'm a big guy. We had someone who worked for us bigger than me, and he wasn't very mindful of like blocking a door, right? Like, and I would get claustrophobic, and I'd start to get anxious because my only exit route was cut off because he filled the door and people couldn't come and go freely. And that changes the dynamic of an environment. So,
yeah, there's books all about taking up space and like how to arrange yourself in a room so that someone feels comfortable or uncomfortable, or, those are negotiation tactics too.
Yeah, as a big guy, I feel like I'm always trying to minimize my space. I think I probably curl in just a little bit, just so that my space doesn't feel so big.
Yeah. So I would say for execs and their operations or admin, just to be aware when you're having a tough conversation, maybe not always sitting across the table from them, sitting at a corner of the table. So it feels more like you're inviting conversation, I guess, rather than going back and forth. Like, it may seem silly or stupid to some of you, but believe me, from an introvert's perspective, or someone who wants to work with someone and who might find you intimidating, this is really key.
Okay, what's your number 2 or number 1? Are we on number 1?
We're on number 1 already.
Well, that was fast.
I know.
Well, we did this so we could spend most of the time on our number 1
we did.
Communication tip.
Yes, our number 1 communication tip. So for me, it is lean in. And so lean in, lean into discomfort. Lean into this whole process, because it's going to be uncomfortable. And if you don't ever embrace that, then the rest of my tips are crap, essentially. Like, it's not even worth it to go through the other ones, because if you're not willing to lean in and be uncomfortable, then you're in the wrong role or the wrong company. So be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And so when I was thinking about these and I thought about this tip specifically, I picked up this book called Quiet, which I am going to tell you right away. I have not read the whole thing because it is deep.
You know what's so funny is I know a bunch of people that have tried to read this book.
Really?
And I know they love it and they like it, but I don't know a single person that's finished it.
Oh, okay. Maybe I should be the first then. Yeah, it's just really deep. And it's a very, it's like a research book. And so I think that's probably part of the reason why. But I picked it up because in the first couple chapters, there were a couple things that I thought would apply to this. And one of them was, I think when you lean in, we have to really think about how do we change that we're uncomfortable having these conversations, or how we don't want to change. I'm not trying to change Margaret, change myself entirely, but I am trying to make sure that I'm my best version of myself. And that does involve leaning in and being uncomfortable. And so one of the things I was always told when I was little or young, like when I between the age of like 5 to probably 18 actually, was that I was a shy person. You're shy, you're so shy, why are you so shy? And whatever you're told, you tend to just become and embrace it. And so we're told that we're shy, which just accentuates that. It doesn't help us break out of our shell. It doesn't help. And so she talks about that in the book. And then she also talks about extroverts and how we live in an extroverted society. And extroverts are comfortable with conflict, not solitude. So she just brings up a lot of really good examples in this book. And so this might be one of the books that you should read if you're not sure that you can lean in. But I just think leaning in for me, if I hadn't leaned into this and really tried to really pushed through a lot of these conversations, situations, we wouldn't be where we are today at all.
I think this is an important differentiation between someone who's going to be an assistant the rest of their life and someone who wants to become like a director of operations or an AE.
Yeah.
Or an EA.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you just want to be, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but if you want to assist someone, be a receptionist, be a team administrator, fine. You can do that the rest of your life. There's lots of people that would want that and want to hire that. But if you want to rise up into a higher level of leadership in the administrative world, you have to lean in.
Yeah.
And so for you, I never had to tell you to do it. I think I was surprised when you started to do it because my previous admin didn't do it. So I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
And then when you did, I just honored it. And over time, you know, now you are who you are now. And that's the direct result of you leaning in, pushing forward, always inserting yourself. You know, where I just think a lot of people are probably a little too much of a wallflower.
Yeah.
To get there.
Yeah. I'm super persistent. And I was reminded of this last Sunday, actually, when I was trying to post a little peek of our podcast. And I couldn't get it to work on my home computer. And I worked at it for 3 hours. I'm not happy about that. I'm not proud of it. But it reminded me, I was like, oh my gosh, I go after it like a dog after a bone, legit, more than I think I know of anybody around me. And so that's awesome. It's good for me to know because it also helps me learn to stop when I need to stop working at something that's maybe not worth my time. But that's exactly how I went after this. Was like, I wasn't giving up no matter how many times I cried.
I was just going to say, I
cried
Margaret,
so many times.
How many times would you attempt something? How many times would you attempt and fail at something before giving up?
Thousands. I don't know if that's the right answer because I ask this question all the time in those interviews. But I always think about what other people are saying. I don't think about what I've said or what I said in the beginning. But I won't ever give up.
Right.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that. I know that about you.
Yeah.
All right. So lean in. My number one tip, and I have to say, I say this with some chagrin because this was probably the first lesson I had to learn, and it wasn't an easy one for me. My number one communication tip between Rainmaker and admin, and this is specifically for executives in their relationship with admin, is be nice.
I love how simple it is.
Rainmakers have a tendency to be impatient and domineering. Even though you pay your admin to help you, doesn't mean you're exempt from basic manners. Showing your appreciation on a regular basis fosters longevity. So I had to learn. Thankfully, I had a coach at the time. I had a business coach, and I don't think it was in reference to you. It might have been. And he just brought this up, just the ability to say, hey, when you ask for something, don't just bark out an order. Say, hey, Margaret, can you please do this? And I had such a hard time with that because it took me, and if I can give admin an insight into why we are the way we are for a second, it is such a hurdle to hire an employee as an entrepreneur because you're working so hard, you're barely making a living as it is, as you create this business. And then when you start to get a surplus, you don't really trust it because that hasn't been your experience.
Sure, yeah.
So you're investing in your business, and then things are busy. And then basically most people wait too long before they get an assistant. And then it's a matter of life and death. Either you're working too much or your personal relationships are on the rocks because you're working too much and you're under leveraged and now you're underperforming. And so hiring somebody is a necessary task of anyone growing a business, but it's not easy. And so by the time you do it, and the fact that they get a guaranteed paycheck and you don't, it kind of, you think, hey, well, I'm paying them to do this task. I shouldn't have to be nice. I should just be like, hey, do this. I'm paying you money in return for you doing things for me. So just do it. And really, my coach worked with me. I was probably very difficult about this. And then over time, he goes, you know what, just try it. Just try it and tell me how it works. And in the end, it works. And in the end, it's the decent thing to do. And what we've seen, as we've talked to so many admin and executives, rainmakers, that this is needed.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I want to say this is probably the number one complaint we get from admin about their employers.
Well, we had our monthly admin mastermind today at the office here in Kita Bothell, and we call it the Pacific Northwest Operations Movement. And there was a girl that came in crying, and it was super sad. And it makes me sad to say this because I feel like in general, most people I know are relatively nice. And so I don't know if it's just you put certain humans in a situation where money's involved and that niceness like falls to the side or is just not seen as an important factor. But man, especially with our personalities, if you have those SCs in these positions, a highly patient, person who wants to bring stability to your business and details, if you're nice to them, you're going to get like a level 10 person compared to the level 4 person you're going to get if you're rude. And it's just, I think, like you said, it's just the decent thing to do. And sometimes when money's involved, the decent stuff falls to the side. But I can't tell you like how heartbreaking it is to see these girls, and I haven't seen, there are plenty of male admin as well that are coming out more and more in the industry and, taking these roles as well. But the women in particular that are just coming broken, it's super sad and ridiculous to see people be so broken. And they're also underperforming now because of it. That's your ROI. If you're rude, you're going to get the same stuff back. You're not going to have someone who wants to perform at a high level for you. If you're nice to me and I know you're having a hard day, I'm going to work hard for you because I know you're having a hard day. It just seems so basic to me, but I can understand from this executive standpoint, though, like you explained, the risk that you're taking. And I know that. It's always in the back of my head. I know how you think about that. So it's that communication. It's owning our positions and saying, hey, if you treat me differently, or if you say this to me when you want me to do something, I can promise you I'm going to receive it better and I'll work harder for you.
So Jill, my fiance, had surgery earlier this week, and I knew that I would have to do a lot that I don't normally do. So I was prepared for it, I thought. And it's interesting that, over a few days of this, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then yesterday being Thursday, she had a tendency at first to say please every time. And then over time, the please fell off. And it was like, hey, get me this. Hey, get me that. And then my attitude soured. And I was less willing to get up and go get her stuff and do things because all I wanted was a simple please. Yeah. And it was petty and dumb. And so I didn't think much of it. Yeah. But it's a good analogy for our business because I ask you to do stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. All the time. Mm-hmm. And if I just left out that word, please, you wouldn't be here anymore. Yeah. I know it for a fact. Yeah. And this seems to be the biggest thing. I don't understand why any executive who has someone working for them for their benefit, that person's job is to make your life easier. Yeah. Why in God's green earth wouldn't you be nice to them? Yeah. Why wouldn't you give them the benefit of the doubt? Why wouldn't you give them common courtesy? Why wouldn't you treat them better than any client you just met for the first time? Mm-hmm. This person is here to make your world run, revolve, keep moving. And all they ask for you to do is to be nice sometimes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's funny. I think TV shows glorify like this domineering, barking
Yeah. That's a good point.
personalities as if they're like artistically, it's tied to their art. I've been watching Flipping Out with this guy, this designer, I think his name's Jeff Fisher in LA. And he's an artist, like he's a designer, so he's an artist. An artist can be particular and exacting. And at the same, and so it's funny because I think there in earlier seasons, he would bark at people and people just had to figure it out and deal with it or they would leave.
Yeah.
And then, I've really seen his development as he really just sets expectations and then inspects what he expects. And anyway, TV, they may pour gas on personalities, right, to get viewership. I hope that people aren't using that as a model in how to treat their assistants and the people that are helping them.
No, I think that's a really good point. I think we often look to society, and I think as I was growing up too, I had all sorts of ideas what certain roles looked like in the business world. And that's why one of the reasons why I actually never thought I would work in a for-profit organization, because I liked the leaders in the nonprofit industry better. And all I had in my head was an image that had been put there by whatever agreement had been, instilled in me. And so when I started hearing about and seeing different leaders that had different personality types, I realized I didn't have to be loud and aggressive and blunt and super direct all of the time in order to be a leader. And so I think it's totally true. I think we get, TV is super powerful as far as translating messages for people. And sometimes just the wrong people are in charge of the message.
Well, we just see this dynamic so often in our own office, not Pickett Street, but in the Keller Williams office, which has 236 agents, a number of teams, a number of administrators. And I could probably tell what the relationship is like just by watching the body language of the admin as they walk by me in the hall, whether or not they feel empowered and confident, and whether or not they're treated well or not. That's
very true. Just simply watching people walk around the office, you can get a lot.
And when people ask why you're still with me, I can say I'm nice to you.
Yep. That's one of the things. One of the reasons.
All right. So let's go through these top 10 communication tips between Rainmaker and admin, just in case you haven't had a chance to write them down and you want to. I will read my number 5 and then your number 5.
Okay.
You read your number 5. All right. Now, my number 5, bring them into the room.
My number 5 is communicate in bundles.
My number 4, ask for most effective ways to communicate.
My number 4 is go for clarity.
My number 3, use personality and behavioral assessments to your advantage.
My number 3 is the fierce conversations dialogue.
Number 2, be aware of body language.
And number 2 for me is slow down to speed up.
My number 1, be nice.
My number 1 is lean in.
So hopefully these 10 communication tips, if nothing else, honestly, what I wanted out of this podcast is I hope to start a dialogue between admin and their Rainmaker. And maybe if any of these things are things that you want to work on, play this podcast for your employer or play this podcast for your admin. And go over each of these and check in with one another and make sure that you're doing each of these things.
Oh, yeah. I think it'd be cool to see this on someone's 411. That the executive and the assistant could read or listen to it for the week and then talk about it at their next meeting.
So we need to explain certain terms. We can't just say 411 and expect everybody to know what that is.
True.
So 411, just so everybody understands, it is a standard for us to meet once a week and for us to discuss Margaret's goals, both in business and in personally. And we have a process for that called a 411. And so what Margaret is expressing is that she is hopeful that if anyone is listening to this and they have a regular time where they check in with their Rainmaker or their admin, that you use that opportunity to talk through some of these communication tips.
Yeah. Thank you for communicating for me. That was perfect.
Yeah, was it?
It was really good.
I did
it was
my interpretation.
Perfect. You did the interpretation.
I forgot. I haven't had to express that before. I joked during a class Margaret and I teach together is that the only reason I'm there is to interpret, since she speaks a different language, I'm there to interpret what she says for all the real estate agents.
Yeah.
Which is 95% true.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch up with you soon.
Yeah. See you next time.